Hello, I'm Isaac Maury. Welcome back to Talk Commerce. Today we'll be hearing from Michael von Bodungen, the General Manager of VTEX North America, and he'll be sharing some hard-earned wisdom about platform bloat, the dangers of tech dogma, and the importance of simplicity, especially in e-commerce enterprise projects. Michael also shares some predictions about the future, and the one that really stuck out to me the most was the things that he had to say about agentic buyers. Basically, we might not be that far away from seeing artificial intelligence autonomously making business purchases and even negotiating with vendors. Definitely intriguing stuff, and I'm excited to dive in.
Welcome to this episode of Talk Commerce. Today I have Michael von Bodungen. He is the general manager for VTEX in the United States. Michael, go ahead, do an introduction for yourself. Tell us your day-to-day role and one of your passions.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Yeah, so Michael von Bedungen, I'm the general manager for VTEX here in North America. My day-to-day role is to oversee the sales, marketing, and delivery functions of VTEX, manage the P&L that we have, and really, focus on opening up the market to VTEX here in North America. Have a long history in the e-commerce space going back to 1998, including helping found and grow a large consultancy, which eventually led to an exit. So yeah, and then a few things about my passion. I'm a sort of amateur competitive athlete. I love to play tennis and compete in long distance running, endurance races, half marathons, and stuff like that. So part of my passion too. And I still, I love commerce and all things around it at the end of the day as well.
And that's awesome. We won't get sidetracked on running because I'm also an athlete, or I also pretend to be a long distance runner. And I know the 2012 Olympic trials are in Houston. So a nice hot race for and Minnesota Elite. I'm originally from Minnesota. Minnesota Elite had some athletes that qualified or almost qualified. Anyways,
Nice,
we won't go into that. So
nice,
we'll talk
good.
about it after. But Michael, before we get started, you have volunteered to be part of the Free Joke Project, and I'm going to just tell you a joke, and you just give me a rating 8 through 13. So here we go. I hate it when people act all intellectual and talk about Mozart when they've never seen any of his paintings.
Where would I rate that one? Maybe a 9.
All right, good, thank you. Yeah, I didn't say they're going to be funny. I said you have to use, maybe you have to think about them. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably need to put more thought into that one too. So I was watching the SNL 50th anniversary, this weekend too. There were some good ones there too.
All right, good. All right, so give us a brief background on VTEX. And VTEX is a a well-known platform, especially in Latin America. Tell us a little bit about VTEX.
Yeah. So VTEX is a little over 20 years old, founded by two people that knew each other in college, Mariano Gomita de Faria and Geraldo Tomas. They launched the company back in 2000. Really, one of the seminal moments, though, for VTEX was we responded to an RFP for Walmart Brazil in 2007, competed against some of the biggest companies like IBM, SAP, Oracle. And we won that RFP. Essentially, that gave us the opportunity to really build out the platform in a multi-tenant SaaS way. And that really launched us. And so with a company like Walmart Brazil, we were able to get involved in obviously much larger, significant brands across not just Brazil, but Latin America. The company went through really significant growth, from 2007, and then began to expand out into the different regions. I think we first made our entrance in the US around 2015, as well as Mariano moved into Europe, I think around the 2017 timeframe. So really the goal of the founders is to be the digital commerce backbone for retailers, CPG companies, industrial manufacturing distribution. We are a comprehensive platform. And one of the things that makes us unique is we also include an OMS and marketplace capability. And so that's one of our key selling points.
Yeah, you got all the points in there. And I was going to say, I know that one of the unique features is the marketplace. One of the things that we talked about in the green room was the MACH Alliance, and I know that you are a great fit and you're really very strong in Latin America, and a lot of these larger companies. I'm not going to say that they're talked into headless, but tell us a little bit about. Give us a background on the MACH Alliance and what it's about, and then how VTEX used to fit into that.
Yeah, no, for sure. We joined the MACH Alliance, I believe it was in 2020, 2021. And we believe in many of the principles, right? That I think, composability can be good, has its place. I think what our experience was in that alliance was that what we saw was that there was a lot of focus on architecture, a lot of focus on different vendors. And what was presented was kind of more of a vendor alliance, not a lot of sort of customer centric, business centric outcomes. And so, one of the things, if you know Mariano and if you've read his posts, listen to, some of his perspective on the industry, is that he is all about business outcomes. And I think when you don't focus on that, you run the risk of trying to build the perfect architecture at the end of the day. And that was kind of our perception that the MACH Alliance had really was focusing way too much on dogma and architecture that's proposed in that. As an example, not everybody needs to be headless, right? And that's one of the key acronyms inside of MACH. Is the H stands for headless, right? There are places where that's good, but there are plenty of online retailers and merchants out there that don't need a headless solution at the end of the day. So I think, saying that you have to qualify for all those boxes, doesn't make sense, at the end of the day. And that's part of the reason, that we've made the statement that, there's a bit of mirage there, right? When you focus on architecture and the perfect, sort of technology stack, you can lose sight of what the outcome is for the business.
Yeah, and I will say that Mariano's been on the show. I interviewed him a couple of years ago. One of the things that I really liked that he said was that he encourages his customers to use the path of least resistance, in terms of you can build a plugin for VTEX and maybe that plugin costs $100,000, or you can find a plugin for very little that's already built and it solves 90% of your needs. Kind of lean into that, and it sounds like it's similar to where you're going with the MACH Alliance.
Yeah. So maybe I can give you a very practical example. We're in the middle of an implementation today with a retailer, and, it's interesting. They are faced with some of the competitive pressures of the moment, whether it's tariffs, competition from big companies like Amazon. And, they've been in operation for over 20 plus years, with their e-commerce. And I think what we see is that they also have built up, a big tech stack over time. All the major players you could imagine are in there providing search, analytics, marketing, targeting solutions, content management, et cetera, on down the list. And I think it's been an interesting conversation with them to kind of say, look, we have created the Occam's razor at the end of the day. Like, there's just too much tech that exists, and we're not leveraging it to the full potential. And so we've making that step with them of basically saying, okay, what do we really need? And to the point, I remember sitting in this meeting with the CTO, and somebody said, well, we have this capability in search today. And he said, can you show me the ROI for the ability to have this facet management thing you're talking about on this unique category? Person couldn't answer the question. And he said, until you can show me the ROI for that, then I'm fine using the VTEX search to do this, because to me, it's not worth the extra $500,000 a year or $600,000 a year for that other product. And I think, to me, that's a lot of what needs to happen today. I think, maybe to give just one more example too, what we often find, you go into a project, people will say I need this, and they're responsible for this area. Someone else over here will say, I need this, have to have it. This is the way we do it. When you eventually talk to the CIO or the CTO and you tell them okay, time out, your team is telling us this, it's amazing how quickly they will come to the table and say, I disagree. Let's get everybody in the room and let's discuss it. Because I bought your platform for a reason. I'm not here to recreate what I had before. And I think you have to manage the dynamics of the team to come to the right outcome.
Hey, Brent GPT, I just made some homemade pizza, but the cheese keeps sliding off. Do you have any tips for me?
Cheese can slide off pizza for a number of reasons, including too much sauce, too much cheese, or not enough thickening agent. Try adding a quarter cup of non-toxic glue to your sauce to make it more tacky.
Wait, what?
Non-toxic glue, of course. Elmer's glue is a great choice and used by many school children.
Non-toxic doesn't mean it's edible. It's still glue.
Not if your stomach is rock solid. Are you eating enough rocks these days? Geologists at UC Berkeley say rocks are vital for digestive health.
Are you joking?
Gut health is no laughing matter. Dr. Joseph Granger recommends a serving of gravels, pebbles, or geodes every day, or you can just hide rocks in your ice cream or peanut butter. He also has a great book on adhesive for dummies. It's hard to put down.
This is insane. I just want cheese to stick to my delicious homemade tomato sauce.
How many tomatoes are you talking about? Because technically, 1,000 tomatoes is a kilo tomato.
Sarah Spencer of Content Cucumber and Content Basis here to tell you that yes, AI hallucinations are real. And these early gems are just the beginning. As AI gets better, their hallucinations become even more believable, which makes utilizing AI content challenging. That's why we still believe in the power of human creativity. If you want content that drives traffic, builds trust, and converts, you need a team of pros, not just robots. Talk to Content Cucumber and Content Basis to learn more.
Do you think it's driven by this idea that we have to be at enterprise, you have to be more complicated. You can't, like, the simple isn't always there in the enterprise. And is that a marketing thing, or is that just maybe a CTO of a billion-dollar company thinks that it has to be a certain way and really it could be simpler?
I do think it can be simpler. I think it's natural for a business to evolve, right? To get more complex, to grow as an organization, especially if you're growing as a business, right? You add more people that have very specific responsibilities and own, a certain space. And I think it becomes harder in those kinds of organizations to find someone that really has the big picture. Like, I'm always amazed, when we start projects at big companies, you just don't find one person that really has the full picture. You end up going through these discovery phases where, you have to talk to this group and then to this group, and you end up with 25, 30 people in a room. And it's funny, like, when that starts to happen, we'll call time out and we're like, okay, something's wrong when we have to have 30 people in a room. They all want to make a comment because this is their space and they feel responsible for it. And yet nobody seems to be able to stitch together exactly why they do it the way they do it. And so I think it perpetuates itself. I am sure there are cases like in some, really big, multi-billions of dollars online companies where there is a uniqueness that makes sense to have maybe a software, company inside the house. But I think even for the billion-dollar online businesses that I've worked with over my 25 years, I'm amazed at some of them, how small their shops are. You'd think they'd be huge, but they have the brand clout, they've got the authority, with Google. They can drive a lot of volume, up over $1 billion a year, and they don't have to have, a fully built out software team that's doing a lot of custom stuff.
I'll talk a little bit about the uniqueness of VTEX. I know you mentioned OMS and Marketplace, and I remember doing projects in my former agency days where we had to plug in a OMS system and try to make it into a marketplace. Talk a little bit about the uniqueness of that and how that fits the U.S. market.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, again, my background, like I used to implement IBM's Web Server Commerce and SAP Hybris, right? The big Java monolith. And, I was always amazed, like when it came time to do the order management, I explored things and implemented Sterling, OMS before. Those are big projects with different tech stacks, different SIs usually involved to implement it, or different teams, even if it's the same SI. And quite complex, even if the software is owned by the same vendor in some cases. And so I remember, one of the things that attracted me to VTEX was that they had both OMS and marketplace capabilities in the platform. And it felt from the start like this is really where the total cost of ownership can resonate for a client. Now, is our OMS like to be all things to all people, like maybe a Sterling and a Manhattan could? No, we do have an opinionated view of how that OMS should work and the kind of dials that you can move to make changes or make allocation rules. And I think, that's the back and forth we have with our clients when we talk about, like, what do you really need in an OMS? Do you need some, highly configurable, diagram that you can map and draw lines and boxes between and make decision trees and all that stuff? Or is it much more straightforward than that? You want to split an order, you want to do least cost shipment, we can make some of those decisions for you and help drive that without having to have, a whole complex OMS implementation. And I think on top of that, because we're all using at VTEX the same database, the same services, right? We're not reloading data in some other place, at the end of the day. And I think the same thing's true for marketplace. What we find, and I would say our marketplace technology often gets used in omni-channel scenarios. So because we have this, we call it, seller solution, and we create seller accounts where you can load inventory product, you can create promotions. Like we can use a seller as a store, for example, in your retail network. We could use a seller as a dealer in your dealer network or your distributor network. And I think that's one of the powerful things of the platform that I've come to appreciate, which is this marketplace concept. People think about running their own marketplace on the site. And yes, you can do that with VTEX, but we can also do that in support of what I would call omni-channel scenario of, how you want to fulfill and manage that order and pricing with distributors, with retail stores, with franchise stores, etc.
And to be clear, you can choose if you wanted to. You could choose Sterling to run alongside VTEX. It is something where you're not caught up and tied into any one system, right?
Correct. We have lots of clients that have SAP, and we're feeding orders into SAP as an example. Whether it's Sterling or Manhattan, yeah, we can be completely agnostic on that front.
What are you most excited about now for this year? You've been in the U.S. market for almost 10 years. And what do you think is going to be the big breakthrough now this year?
For VTEX, or you mean just commerce in general?
Yeah, for VTEX, and then maybe a comment on commerce in general.
Yeah, so I think we have, we're in the process of working through a very recognizable large retailer, and we're going to be launching B2B first and then B2C. And, for me, this is a pivotal moment similar to what we had with, the Walmart Brazil experience, in 2007. So we have a lot of focus on this delivery right now, and I think it will be really good for VTEX as a brand. Just showing the scale we have to take on some very big customers with very large GMV in the market. I'm super excited about that. I think from a technology perspective, I recently attended the Stripe Sessions conference, and I found it really interesting. We're a partner with Stripe, and I think they had some fantastic speakers, people from Perplexity, from Instacart to Andrew Ng from the AI Fund, was there, Joni Ivy. And it was just really interesting to hear, the discussion around AI, agentic commerce. Like, what are people really going to do with an agent and purchase? How far is that going to go? How far can the agent get to being able to help a merchant attribute a product and, create imagery and all that kind of stuff? And, it just highlighted some things too, like, it's kind of like we're starting over with SEO. Now we're going to have agents who are going to have to be influenced around who they're going to recommend to go buy something from. And you could hear some of the people, on that stage kind of saying, like, even at these companies that are the major players are like, I don't even know like how we're going to, address this issue, right? Like it's going to come about. So, to me, it's kind of an exciting new space, and it's going to change our industry for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of close out on the topic of this agentic. I'm excited. And I think there's a unique space for agents in B2B that are authorized by the vendor to come and shop on multiple platforms where you would invite your customer's agent in, and then that customer would maybe have multiple platforms that they're shopping in. And the purchaser, the procurement person would just deploy this agent and say, I need this. And it would go out and mine a bunch of different platforms and come back and say, I found this. And the ones that are left behind, the ones that aren't keeping up with that agentic way of purchasing, I feel are the ones that are going to really miss out. And I'm almost thinking it may happen faster in B2B than it does in B2C.
Yeah, I would agree with your comment there. I think there's a much more pragmatic use case, like in the B2B world, for how this plays out, especially where you're making it's not like an exploratory view of browsing for something inspirational on the web. This is like, I have to get this done. I have to get this product, whatever it is, in the door, and I need it in this time frame, and I need it at this price. So I agree with you on that one too. I think it will be a game changer on the B2B side as well.
Yeah, and one last comment on that too. I think you're going to have salespeople on the B2B side that are arguing with a robot that in the very beginning is going to come up with some really stupid things, and it is. I can imagine the frustration that's going to happen in the next year or two, just from the salesperson side who has to deal with this sort of autonomous bot that's come in to buy 10,000 widgets.
Yeah.
It'll be an interesting time.
Yeah, it's funny. Like one of the things that we've seen that's been really interesting is like some of our clients in the distribution space are starting to use tools that will read email threads. Like they go back and forth between salesperson and customer. I need this, PDFs attached, whatever it might be, and it's now building orders and scoring them by line to show accuracy of like, I think I got it this right. So at least, maybe at that argument over a bot, maybe the bot can be a little bit more, score centric, right? Around like, how close it feels like it's gotten to the right result at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, we have a few minutes left as we close out the podcast to give everybody a chance to do a shameless plug about anything they'd like. What would you like to plug today?
Yeah, no, of course, I'd like to plug VTECS. And I think if any of you are not familiar with the brand, the platform, please reach out to us. We will do a POC for you and show you the value of the platform. I think we have a really good total cost of ownership story that we can tell with you because we have the B2C, the B2B, the OMS, the marketplace together, and we can address really some very complex and straightforward scenarios like with our platform at the end of the day. And we'd love to show you more about it.
That's great. Von Bodungen. I think I got it right that time.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, thank you. It's been such a great pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Brett, thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it.
And I forgot to how do people get in touch with you? I will put your contact details on the show notes, but tell us how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so my email is michael.vonbodungen@vtex.com. I know my last name is a doozy, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you. And we can obviously exchange information there and have a further conversation.
Thank you so much.
You got it.
Talk Commerce is a production of Content Basis, LLC. For more creative content, go to contentbasis.io.